been quite a while since I've done this presentation, but it's been a long time coming, and I apologize for not getting it out on YouTube quicker. I did this one about 2 years ago now, almost, and I wanted to get it out there. I have one or two more that I need to get done as well, but I thought I'd get this one going today, since it's coming up on farming season here in northern Indiana. So this was a presentation I entitled "How It's Possible to Make $12,000 on 1,300 square feet." Now, I have a lot more square footage than that, but that's what I figured out I was using when I did this presentation. I went through all of my beds, measured everything, and this is what I came up with. So what is urban farming? Well, simply put, urban farming is growing or producing food in a city or heavily populated town. I live in northern Indiana, as I said before, very close to Notre Dame College. I'm in a part of the city called River Park. It's just this little area that used to be its own city until it was incorporated into the bigger city. And I'm very close to the houses next to me. I have a 1/4 acre. It's a long lot. So I use, right now, I use behind my house in between my garage, and then behind my garage back to the alley is where most of the farming takes place. And what distinguishes urban agriculture is a level of commerce. So I'm growing product that's going to be sold, as opposed to being grown for my own personal use or for sharing with neighbors, which I still do that. I still grow stuff for myself. If I have extras, I give it to the neighbors, especially like eggs for my chickens. As more of us begin to understand our food system, more of us seek to have more input into how food is grown, how it is treated after being harvested, how it moves from one place along the food route to another. And people have begun to understand how far food travels. And as a consumer, you don't really have a say in what's grown or how it's grown. So with urban agriculture, you can change that by knowing who your farmer is, where it is, how close it is to the farm. Um, and we can, as a consumer and with urban agriculture, we can become more a part of the larger food system. So, like, I'm 5 blocks from my farmer's market. So I will typically harvest the night before market, and then bring it to market in the morning. So it's about as close as you can possibly get to farm to table at our market. I am the closest farm to market. There's a couple other urban farms in my area that are also relatively close, but I am the closest. So I'd say there's 3 of us that are really close as far as like the people you should talk to and get your food from if you're really concerned about how far your food goes or comes from, and then also how your food is grown as well. So breaking that down, on average, fresh produce travels approximately 1,500 miles from farm to table, and typically it's picked unripe and later gassed to ripen after transport. Or it's highly processed in factories using preservatives, irradiation, or other means to keep it stable for transport and sale. One of the ones that most people are familiar with is that tomatoes are typically gassed that you see in the grocery store. Even the ones that say vine ripened, they're picked green and then they're gassed so that they turn red, either during transport or even sometimes in the store. And with urban farms, you can greatly reduce the food miles, and most, if not all, organic producers. My farm, as an example, I don't use any chemicals whatsoever. I use compost that I create on site. I use comfrey tea that I grow on site, and chicken manure is also from my hens, which I use for fertilizing. I don't use any fungicides, herbicides, pesticides, so it means that whatever I bring to market is as nutritious as it can be. And if I have a crop fail, it just fails. I'm not going to use the chemical to revive or fix it. I'm also very aware of the food miles as I travel exactly 1 mile from my farm to the South Bend Farmers Market. Now, this was true as of a couple years ago. I have moved, so I'm actually closer. Um, I moved from a mile away from the market to 5 blocks from the market. So I'm actually closer than when I made this presentation. And with just the quarter-acre farm, and at that time the 4 years that I was selling at markets, I've provided 1,750 pounds of produce to the community. I've done 2 markets over the years. Now on my 4th year at just the South Bend Farmers Market, which is the only market I've been selling at for the past 4 years. I'm not gonna do other markets. I mean, maybe later on down the road, but right now I'm happy with the market that I have and how I've been doing at the market. And for me, it just makes sense because I work a full-time job besides doing the market. So it'd be kind of difficult for me to pick up another market and do that. But I do know other farmers, especially urban farmers, that do more than one market. So it is something to look into. But for now, I'm happy just how I'm doing it. My big philosophy is grow food, not lawns. American lawns occupy 30 to 40 million acres of land, and roughly 5% of our air pollution comes from the mowers used to maintain them. Every year, nearly 17 million gallons of gas is spilled during the use of lawn equipment. That's more than the Exxon Valdez spilled. Homeowners spend billions of dollars and typically use 10 times the amount of pesticide and fertilizers per acre on their lawns as farmers do on crops. These chemicals then become runoff and a major contributing factor for water pollution. Between 30 to 60% of urban water is used on lawns, and most of it is wasted due to improper watering. I have lawn equipment, including a mower, chipper, tiller, chainsaw, and they're all electric. And I use water as well, but a majority of that comes from 3 rain barrels, totaling 395 gallons when full. Now, that was true of my old farm. Right now, I don't have a rain system set up at my new farm, but this was how it worked before, and this is how I'll be setting it up again. So all of my water will be coming from rain. And I actually don't have any lawn equipment right now. But again, when I do, it will all be the same way. I've been a big proponent of not using gas for anything, just because I think it's wasteful. Electric does just as good. And then people like to talk about what's a GMO, and a lot of people get confused about what a GMO is. And companies like Monsanto, which they're still Monsanto, but now they're owned by Bayer, create genetically engineered foods, often called genetically modified organisms. They use biotechnology to alter the seeds or a livestock's genetic material. Instead of using breeding methods that farmers have used for centuries to select for desirable traits, GMO crops and GMO animals may be radically altered to repel pests, withstand herbicides, or grow faster. And these changes are patented to help corporations increase their control over the seed supply, but rarely have the best interest of people or the environment in mind. So 88% of the corn grown in the United States is genetically modified, 93% of soy, 94% of cotton, 75% of Hawaiian papaya, 90% of canola, and 54% of sugar comes from genetically modified sugar beets. And we're not even delving into the processed food that has genetically modified corn in it, corn syrup being one at the top on that list. And we now have Arctic apples and innate potatoes that don't brown when cut or bruised. And so this was something that came out a couple years ago. And you're not going to know if that apple or that potato is actually bad because it's never going to brown. So you could, like normal apples, say you're making a pie and you peel it and you leave it on the counter. Typically, we put lemon juice on it to make it not turn brown. It doesn't matter what you do, they're not going to turn brown, which is kind of just weird because you should know when your vegetables are bad. And if this is something they're doing with apples and potatoes, what's next. So they're going to keep doing this with other vegetables so that we're not going to know when any of our vegetables are bad. And one of the stories that I've talked about for a long time when I do these classes is one of the first GMOs that I ever learned about was was a strawberry, and I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. But what they did is they took the Arctic salmon, and they took um, a gene out of the Arctic salmon and put it into the strawberries so that the strawberries could withstand the crazy cold of winter, so that we could grow strawberries year round. So we had, a part of fish in a strawberry, which is not what we're supposed to do. You don't put animal into fruit or animal into vegetable. That's not how things were intended. There's other ways to get that, and that's by selecting desirable traits through normal methods of breeding, and keep doing that, and we can get to a point where we could have strawberries that would grow longer than normal, which we already do, that didn't need a GMO. So that's just one example of many. One of my favorite sayings is "Be the change that you wish to see in the world," and that was by Mahatma Gandhi. And it's often hard when you learn about the bigger picture and you want to fix it all. You start to question whether there's anything you can do. And for me, those questions were, how can I provide better food in my community? Where am I going to get land to do it? What do I even grow? Where do I sell it? How do I grow without using chemicals or GMO seed? And can I make money doing it, competing against bigger farmers? Because at my market, like I said, I think there's about 3 of us that are small farmers, and really there's only 2 of us that are actual urban farmers. The other small farmer has almost 7 acres, if I remember correctly, whereas myself and the other urban farmer that is at market, in total of all the land that we use, I think we have less than an acre. She might have more than that, but don't quote me on that. But still, there's only 2 of us that I would say are actual urban farmers. And yeah, 7 acres isn't a lot either compared to some of these farmers that have hundreds of acres. But as far as like urban, I could consider, real small scale backyards, converting lawns, um, biointensive planting, or square foot gardening, or just getting a lot of produce out of a small plot is kind of what I consider urban farming. And those questions will keep coming, and there's only one thing you can do, and that's just start growing. And so you begin as small or as large as you want, and you start with no land or as much land as you can get a hold of, or you can allow your land to be farmed in exchange for food. So there's all kinds of ways that you can participate in the urban farming movement. If you want to do it yourself, I always recommend, if you have yard, start there. And I know some people, you might be renting a house and you can't use your lawn. There's plenty of other ways. If your landlord won't let you garden, there's plenty of other ways. You can buy raised beds at Tractor Supply Company that are actually like lifted up on wheels. They are a little bit expensive, like $100, but if you're going to if you're going to build raised beds with like cedar, you're going to spend that much anyways. Growing in pots is another awesome way that you can grow where you're at if you're not allowed to garden on the property. I've been doing peppers, tomatoes, potatoes, strawberries, herbs. You can pretty much do anything in a pot. There's even, like, if you want to do squash, there's squash that grow in that are much smaller. There's a cucumber, for example, that I've been growing for years for my pickles, is called Space Master, and the vine only grows to 2 feet, maybe 2.5, and that's an easily potable cucumber that you can grow. So there's all kinds of ways that you can grow in pots or in other kinds of raised beds if you can't grow in the ground where you're at. The other thing is, I have people every year approach me that say, hey, I've got this land and I'm not using it. I would love for you to come and farm it and use it. And, either I'll say yes or no, or I'll pass that along to somebody else. A lot of times I say no just because I've got too much going on. But I always try to find somebody that can use it, because I don't want, if somebody's offering land for gardening / farming, I want them to do that. And then the other one is if you don't want to do any of that, but you still want to reap the benefits of the food that comes from urban farming, you can let somebody else use your property. They will grow, and basically you'll have a CSA in your backyard. So when I've done that, say I've got, we'll just say I have four beds on your property of produce, and each week you would get a quarter of each bed, and then I would take the rest of it to market. And so you would get, lettuce and tomatoes and peppers and greens. We'll just say, for example, you get a quarter of all that I had on those, and then I would take the rest of that to market. And a lot of times what happens when you allow somebody to come in and farm your land, we'll work with you as far as like, well, what do you like? What do you like to eat in vegetables? We will plant that and make that part of our plan so that you get what you want. And then we also can go, okay, well, maybe this isn't something I can sell at market, but it's definitely something I can grow for you in this plot. And then I'll take the other, plots to grow what I need. So there's always ways that you can contribute to urban farming. So if there's something you want to get started, you define your space. Your farm area and your personal area need to be separated. Your farm is your business and your yard is your personal space. These need to be defined and used as such. At my old house, I built a fence within a fence. I had a privacy fence all around my property, but I also had a dog and a pool and a grill and a table for outdoor seating. And so I built a small fence that went across part of the backyard so that was our area. And then there was a gate that opened up and that went basically to the farm. Choose your crops. The key to urban farming is high yield, quick growth, and high dollar crops. So it's important to find a niche market of a crop that no one else does or that you do really well, and it grows rather quickly for harvest or has multiple harvests. And sometimes you don't even need a niche crop. I mean, every single market, everybody wants fresh lettuce, and that's always like a number one. Pretty much every urban farmer grows some type of lettuce to sell at market. Most of us grow quite a few different varieties and then mix those together as like spring mix, summer mix, fall mix, winter mix. And we find different varieties that work for us that we can do the cut and come again, which is you're cutting the outside leaves, letting the inner ones keep growing. Basically, you can get 4 or 5 cuttings off your lettuce. So there's all these tons of different lettuces, and you just have to find what works in your area. Everybody's area is going to be different as to what they can grow. Some people don't grow tomatoes, for instance, because it's a lot of work. I grow tomatoes because I make a lot of money off of them. Most other farmers do as well. And then I also grow some specialty crops every year, usually something different that nobody else has. One of those is now I'm having a blank, but it's this really odd Armenian cucumber. It's just really long cucumber. Nobody else has that, and for a couple of years I've had that, and it does really well because it's something unique, and a lot of people don't know what it is. So I will cut it up and have little samples sitting out so people can taste it. And usually when people taste something, they'll buy it because they go, oh, this is unique, interesting. Casper eggplants is something else I do, which is a white eggplant. I've done the Turkish eggplants, which are orange. So just some different things that nobody else really has because most farmers markets, at least in my area, all have the same thing. And by same thing, I mean, the giant purple eggplant that you see at the market, the normal kale that you see at the market, normal carrots. We've just started in the last few years. A lot of farmers actually are carrying rainbow carrots now, which is nice. But for the longest time, everybody just had orange carrots. Everybody has the same sweet corn. I've brought popcorn to market before, just whole popcorn, let people take it home, pop it in paper bags on the microwave, and they love it. So just having different things and trying to be unique, I think, is a big deal at the market. Trying to distinguish yourself from everybody else. And then, finding your marketplace. And I always recommend starting at a small market if you've never done it, and then working your way up to larger ones. Starting small allows you to have less overhead, and it'll help you get acquainted with selling at a market. So I kind of had a unique opportunity where I worked at the farmers market that I'm at right now. I worked for a couple different sellers for a couple years, which got me acquainted with how the market worked. It got me acquainted with different things. I worked for a deli first, and then I worked for a reseller of produce. So I got to see kind of both sides of the market, one with vegetables, one with meats and cheeses, and I got comfortable with the customers and how everything worked and how fast paced it was on some days and how it wasn't on others. But when I started selling, I started at a really small market where we only had 50 to 100 people on the Saturday, which is relatively small considering the market that I'm at now. In the summertime, can have 3,000 to 5,000 people on a Saturday. Uh, but it was nice to start out that way because then I could kind of gradually get myself into selling my own product. It's a lot different when you're selling somebody else's product because you might care about it, you might care about your job, but it's not necessarily yours. At the end of the day, you get to go home, and the owner, that's his stuff. It's his responsibility, not yours. When it's your responsibility and when it's your product, you take a lot more pride in what you're doing. And I started out at that real small market, and then I also did another small market that had about 150 to 200 customers on Thursday nights. And that was really interesting too because it was a completely different community, different people. They bought different things. I sold a lot differently. So it was really nice to start out small and then go into a bigger market where now I have regular customers or people that stop and talk to me, and it's been really nice. But I always recommend starting out small and then going big, unless you want to jump in head first and go big. But sometimes it can be a really large investment to go big. For example, the Thursday market that I did was free, and then the smaller Saturday market that I started off doing was between $5 and $10 a week, depending on how much space I used. And now, when I started at this market, when I leased before I bought my booth, that was $1,800, I think, for the 6 months that I did, and that was my lease amount. And then when I bought my booth, I paid $9,000 for my space, and then I also pay a weekly fee, and that changes from fall, winter, and spring, summer. So there's a huge amount of money in small markets and large markets, and I have friends that do Chicago markets that are a lot more than that. So you need to weigh all those in what you're doing. Also have a VAP in mind, and that just stands for value added product. So every good farmer has a value added product, something you already grow or raise that can be turned into an upsell. So mine, for example, is pickles. I use my cucumbers to create a value added product. I've been making pickles for 19 years now. I've been selling them for 9. And it was something that I kind of just started doing to do. It wasn't something I necessarily wanted to do. And I went from those small markets and selling 176 jars, I think the first year I sold, to now I sell over 2,000 jars a year. It's something I constantly do. I started out doing like 4 to 6 flavors. Now I do 12 to 15. I'm always changing things. I have people drive from Chicago to get them. I have people drive from southern Indiana, people from Ohio. So now it's kind of, I've actually changed my sign and I changed my business cards to include now it says homemade pickles because it's something I'm known for, and people will come sometimes more to get my pickles than even to get my produce. And it's become a huge part of the money that I bring in, especially in the winter months where I don't really have anything. I have microgreens. Occasionally, like this year, I had carrots because the ground hasn't been terrible. Um, and I'll have herbs here shortly that I've been growing inside. But if you're doing, I do a year-round market, and I know a lot of people only do a market for 6 to 8 months, where our market's open year-round. So, if I'm going to be there, I have to have something, and for those months, the pickles actually sustain me. So, always having a value-added product is something that you should think about if you're going to get into this. So, what is a quick crop? That is something that can be harvested in 25 to 45 days or multiple harvests over a long period of time. So these are some examples. Cherry bell radishes take 25 days. Sheboygan turnips take 30 days. These are baby turnips that are a little bigger than radishes, but not much. Most beets you can pick as babies, 34 to 40 days. Again, about the size of a radish. Loose leaf lettuce, which is what I talked about earlier. You harvest leaves in week 3, then every other week thereafter 4 to 6 more times. I harvest outside leaves first, let the innards grow. It does take more time, but I find I get better. The leaves look better to me instead of using, some people do the method where they take this little machine and it goes over the top and cuts everything off, and then you bag that, and I'm not crazy about that. That's just me though. Zucchini or patty pan, you can pick baby squash at 35 to 40 days. Tomatoes, every cherry tomato will be ready first. Always make sure you buy indeterminate varieties. For slicing tomatoes, find a good hybrid like the Mountain Series or Polbig. There's a few quicker heirlooms, but stick to hybrids for your first tomatoes if you're going to be selling those. You can have heirlooms available at a later time for a specialty crop. So this was something that I learned very quickly. When I started, all I did was heirloom everything. And I had a really hard time selling tomatoes because a lot of heirlooms do not look like what store-bought tomatoes look like. So I ended up after a couple years doing that, switching, and I do half and half. So I do heirlooms and I do hybrids. The hybrids are quicker growing usually, and then a lot of them just look like the red tomatoes that you get in the store. And I really like the Polbig, and then there's like 4 varieties of the Mountain Series that do really well for me. But like I said, I'm in northern Indiana. I'm in zone 5. So, look in the seed catalog for your zone and what would do well for you. And actually, as far as if you're going to sell tomatoes and grow tomatoes, if you want to do one or the other, do cherry tomatoes, you'll make more money because you get more of those over the season. And I actually make a lot more money with cherry tomatoes than I do with regular tomatoes. And if I could recommend one, I would say the yellow pear tomato. It's always been a favorite around here. I sell out every single year. Very rarely do I bring those home with me when I take them to market. So other income sources are microgreens. Those are especially good in the winter because you can grow them anywhere, and that's kind of what I talked about earlier. I usually have sunflower in the winter, which sometimes sell well, sometimes don't. Our market's kind of iffy on microgreens sometimes, and one of the other urban farm does microgreens year round, and they do them really well. And so I only do one, and that's the sunflower. And I, recommend people just go down to the other urban farm and get microgreens if they want a bigger variety. It's not really something that I'm too into, so I'm happy to send somebody to get them somewhere else. But that is, if you're good at it, that's a really good winter item. Fresh herbs, and they're not necessarily a quick crop, but they're a high dollar crop. So I can get a 6-inch pot, say a 6-inch pot by 6-inch round. I think maybe that's a 12-inch pot by 6-inch round. So a bigger pot, I can put basil, sage, oregano, thyme. Not very many. Snip it so that it grows out, so it's bushy. And I will usually do about 8 to 12 plants in one of those pots, so it looks really full. Use a potting mix that I make myself. I usually sell that for about $25. So that is a huge amount of money for not many plants. And those always sell well. And I sell single basil, single sage, single oregano, single thyme. herbs do really well because people want those year round. They want fresh herbs year round, and it's really hard to get those. I know you can get them at the stores, but a lot of times those are not very good. They don't look very healthy. They don't last very long. So people will pay a premium to get something that's fresh and local, and they can just keep cutting and growing. And um, fresh herbs are a great way to make income. Um, Seedlings in the spring, those always sell well, and they're really easy to sell. And I don't typically sell them for a lot. I see some people at the market sell them for like $3 or two for $5, and I will sell seedlings for that price if they're big, like my tomatoes. As they get bigger, as I have to keep repotting them, say I take a tray of uh, tray of 18, I think, of the single cell. If I take those, usually when I take those to market, I'll sell those for um, a dollar a plant, and they're fairly small, say 8-10 inches. Well, as I take those home, because they're not always going to sell, because people don't want to plant right away when I start bringing them. Sometimes I bring them just to go, hey, people go, oh, hey, it's getting time to plant. People are starting to have seedlings out. So as I'm taking those home and bringing them back, they're getting bigger and bigger, and I'm having to repot those. And then the price goes up. $2 as it gets bigger, $3 it gets bigger, 4 or 5, so on and so forth, until they're so big that I just plant them myself if I can find space somewhere for them. But seedlings generally sell really well, especially if you have some unique varieties of stuff, or you have something in the market that somebody else doesn't have. There's a person on the other side of the market um, that I'm at that has a lot of tomatoes, and sometimes she doesn't even have some of the ones that I have. So, just kind of having some unique varieties and checking out your market first and seeing what they have before, you start, or just asking the other farmers what they have and maybe doing something different. But yeah, seedlings are a great way. And weeds. And yes, I'm being serious. What we consider weeds are actually amazing food. Dandelion greens and purslane are two that I sell. Um, and actually, dandelion greens, even though they do grow in the yard, and I will usually eat those for myself, I actually buy dandelion green seeds and grow those. But purslane grows everywhere. You'll see it in the cracks of sidewalks. It's real thick, almost feels like an aloe plant, and those are really high in vitamin C, um, omega-3 fatty acids, and something else I can't think of off the top of my head. But I usually and I bought seeds for those as well too. It was a different variety that doesn't grow here in northern Indiana, but I will, if I see those growing in the garden area, I leave them, and then I will snip those and put them in containers, and people buy them. So you can sell what people consider weeds, as long as you educate people about what they are, tell them how good they are for them. I let people taste pretty much everything, and then usually get some to buy that and keep coming back to buy it. And then houseplant starts. I'll sell spider plant babies, aloe babies. Um, there's a plant called Lyman cerevisiae that I used to sell babies of. Um, all kinds of house plants. Not everything has to be about food, just growing things. Flowers is another example, which I've just started selling as of last year, and just a few. But yeah, you can always sell other things besides just food. So just kind of think outside of the box as an urban farmer. We need to find ways to make money year round without spending a fortune. And, my business model exists with a small plot of land in mind while maximizing profit. So here's purslane, and I kind of forgot about this slide. So it has more omega-3 fatty acids than some fish. It's high in vitamins A, C, and E, high amounts of iron, magnesium, calcium, potassium, and manganese. So seeing this picture, I'm sure you've seen this everywhere. And this is something I started selling, I think, 3 years ago. And I typically sell out when I take it to market. All the little plastic containers that family members get from the store of like raspberries and blueberries and stuff, I have them save those for me, and then I clean them, take the stickers off, and I will reuse those and put my herbs in them if I'm not growing like a live plant for somebody. If I'm cutting herbs and selling that market, or this is what I consider an herb. or a salad green. Usually people put this in salads. It's also really good in smoothies. If people don't necessarily like the taste of it, but they want the vitamins of it, it's really good in smoothies. But anyways, I'll put these in those plastic clamshells. And then finding a marketplace, which I talked about before, and this is very specific to where I'm at because this presentation was done where I'm at, but this is just, you can look at these and kind of find those, probably find these in your area too. And like I said before, I recommended starting off small so you can get your feet wet and see if it's something you really want to do. And so in my area, there was the Walkerton Farmers Market. This was the one that was free on Thursday nights that I did. And there's also the Plymouth Farmers Market, which I never did, but it was super busy, and it's only $10 a week. It's an outdoor market, so this is something else that I've talked to people about. You need to consider if you want to do an outdoor market or an indoor market. I did outdoor markets for a couple of years, and I really didn't like them, and that was because twice, I think it was actually 3 times. When I think about it, we had torrential downpours, and a lot of my stuff just got ruined. Tents got ruined. Tablecloths got ruined. It was just a nightmare, and it wasn't something I wanted to deal with. And so I wanted to be in an indoor market. Now I really like outdoor markets. I think they're great. I love visiting outdoor markets. I just don't want to do them. And then the other one was the Urban Garden Farmers Market, which is really close to me, and that was the original. That was the first one I started out doing, and that was $5 to $10 in my area. So these are markets that are in my area, but wherever you're at, you should check out and see, if you have markets similar to this, or if you're in this area, you can check out these markets. So for value-added products, whether you're a small farmer or a large farmer, a value-added product is something that'll help you bring in other sources of income, which is something we're always looking for as an urban farmer, or as any farmer. But me being an urban farmer, some of these aren't available, but it will give you an idea of things you can do. So soap, lotion, and lip balm using milk from goats. It's a huge seller in our market. I unfortunately can't have goats because I'm in the city. I'm allowed to have chickens, and that's about it. Pickles from cucumbers, which I talked about, that's what I do. Herbal salves, which is a medicinal ointment used for healing wounds and sores. Jams and pies from fruits and berries, I do that. Wreaths from pine trees, it's an enormous seller during the holidays, I also do that. And then maple syrup from tap trees. I had planned on doing that at my old farm. I haven't really looked at this property to see if it's something I'm going to do because I don't have enough maple trees. But these are all just some ideas of things that you can do for value-added products. Of course, a really good place for inspiration or to look for other things that you can do is Pinterest. I know it's a complete time suck and you can waste a bunch of time on there, but there's some great ideas for stuff that you can do for value-added products or just to add to what you already do at your farmer's market, or if it's something you're looking into doing. So of everything, space is the most important for urban farmers. You need to learn to let go of conventional spacing, and implementing square foot and or biointensive gardening is what I consider a key to successful urban farming. Also including a few permaculture practices, you can get even more production out of the sum of the same spaces, basically double, even triple production per square foot. Using radishes as an example, conventional spacing would have us plant radishes 2 to 3 inches apart, with rows being 12 inches apart. That's 6 radishes per square foot. With square foot gardening, we can plant 16 radishes per square foot, and there's no 12-inch rows either. And with biointensive spacing, we can fit 25 radishes per square foot. So there's this huge amount of learning how to space, learning how things grow. There's no reason to have a foot apart from radishes. I have planted entire rows of 30 inches by 15 feet of radishes. You get an enormous amount of radishes out of that space, and you don't need all that the traditional spacing, what it says on the back of the package. And that's because a lot of that conventional spacing, which you see here, is for tractors. So what you see in a lot of those packages has never been changed. It's been for tractors. So conventional spacing, you got 6 radishes 2 inches apart, 12-inch rows. Square foot method, you get 16 radishes 3-inch apart, 0 rows. And then the biointensive method, you get 25 radishes 1 inch apart, 0 rows. So all these are going to take practice. For some things, I still do use a little tool, and that's for things that, like corn, for example. If and when I grow corn, I know that's kind of a very specific, but for a lot of things, I've been doing this for so long now that I can just eye it and just put them where I know they need to go. But you can buy little square foot tools and even biointensive tools, little plastic, almost like plexiglass plates that you can carry around that have all the holes and the measurements in them, and you can just put them down and put your seeds in. Makes it real easy. So that was my old farm. So you can see there is my greenhouse that I've had for 2 years now. That is a aluminum frame and polycarbonate, 8 foot by 20 foot. It's probably the best investment I've ever made. But over on the right side of the screen, my right, is sunchokes or Jerusalem artichokes, which I did 1 year. There's peppers and tomatoes all on the side of the greenhouse, and marigolds. There's basil in pots and peppers in pots, and I've got bamboo and a little pond behind the bamboo over there. There's rows of greens and basil in the middle row there. That was all beans. In the back is squash and pickles and tomatoes, and there's kale back there. The chicken coop is in the back there that you see back in front of the garage. Those onions and asparagus patch. And this was, I want to say this was 3 years ago. I think 3 years ago was when this picture was taken. In that middle where the green beans are, that later became a strawberry patch, and those all strawberries. So this is just a small amount of space, and all those beds equal 1,300 square feet. And with that, I grossed $12,000 in 1 year, which doesn't seem like a lot, but that's a really small amount of space to grow stuff in. And 1,300 square feet is not really a lot. And I know it looks like a lot. It probably looks like a lot more than that by looking at the picture. But by measuring the beds and getting the square foot of each bed, that's what it came out to be. I didn't count the walkways, of course, because that's not where I was growing anything. So some recommended tools is a greenhouse of any size, and that's for seed starting and season extension. I don't know what I did before I had a greenhouse. It was really tough to get all of my seed started for the amount of production that I do inside the house. Even though having a basement, I still couldn't really do all of it, and the amount of electricity and lights and stuff I would have to use to do that was kind of absurd. So I've had this greenhouse for I think this is my 3rd season with this, my 3rd year having it. Before that, I had one, I can't think of the name of the company. Oh, it's terrible. But you can get decent greenhouses on Amazon for $600 to $800. They're just not going to last as long. That greenhouse is by Shelter Logic. That was the first one that I had, and that was a 10 by 20, and that lasted 2 seasons before the door ripped out because it was Velcro, and I had to build a new door for it. And then the top of it started ripping, and it was nice to have as a beginning greenhouse. But once I had that and had it rip and break on me after spending the money on it, that I thought it was going to be a long-lasting greenhouse, I realized I should have just spent the $2,000 on the greenhouse that I have now. But any kind of greenhouse for seed starting and season extension is great. A tiller for creating growing spaces, unless you're going to create no-dig beds. A washing station. a tine bow rake, which is a round and a round point shovel and a transfer shovel if you have a compost pile. A wheelbarrow, and I just bought a wheelbarrow like 4 years ago. I don't know how I lived without it before that. And heavy duty pruners and a small garden shovel. I love Fiskars. Pretty much all their stuff has been really good. I pretty much just buy their stuff now as far as like garden tools go. Washing station. You can get one on Amazon. They call it a fish washing station, but I've used that for years, and it's like $60. I think it might even be cheaper now. But you just hook it up to your hose. It has a faucet, a place to rinse, and a little area you can put your produce on, and that's been great as far as just like a basic washing station. I'm going to be building a bigger washing station here this year, but as far as just starting out, there's always cheaper ways to do something. You could even get an old table if you have it. Get an old sink, hook up your hose to that. Put the sink in the old table if you've got one that you cut out. There's lots of ways you can do it, even on super cheap. These are just ways if you want to buy something. This is something you can buy that's cheaper than going out and buying like professional washing stations and stuff that cost a fortune. So everybody's asking, where's the money come from? So how much am I going to make? And it all depends on your product. So for me, beans and potatoes and tomatoes are, beans and potatoes $3 a pound. Heirloom tomatoes are $3 each. There was somebody else in our market that was selling for like $5 each. So it depends on where you're at and what you get a premium for. I don't like to charge a ton because I still want people to be able to buy my product and not feel like they're out a lot of money, but still getting something that's really good for them. Peppers are $4 to $16 a pound. Cherry tomatoes are $6 a pound. Greens and lettuce $6 a pound. Microgreens $8 a tray. Strawberries $12 a pound. Bagged herbs, I make a ton off of, $16 a pound. And then seedling trays, $12 to $24 each. That depends on the seedlings, what size tray. Carrots I sell for $6 a pound. You can charge a premium for organic, locally grown produce because it's costing you a lot more to grow that. And especially because we don't use any kind of chemicals or anything, we're just out our product. If our product gets eaten by bugs or whatever, gets a disease and is just gone. So people are willing to pay a little bit more for really good produce and to know the farmer and to know where it's grown. So this is where all the money comes from as far as things that I grow. And that's just the money from what we grow. My value-added products and other income sources. So I make bread, it's $4 a loaf. Fruit jam or butter, like I make blueberry jam and apple butter, and actually those I sell for $5 now. My pickles are $6 and $8. If I make larger jars, they're $16. So my prices have gone up a little bit. I sell pies for $8 each. I sell spice and dip mixes for $3. I make apple syrup. That's $6. There's so many possibilities out there. And not one person can do them all. So, use your strengths to extend your financial potential, things that you're good at. I just happen to like baking, especially bread. So it was just something I started doing. And then I've been making jam at home and apple butter at home for years. So I just started selling that. Like I said, pickles I've been doing for 19 years. Pies, I only do a Dutch apple pie because that's just what I like making, and I think it's easy. So that's the only pie I ever make and sell, but people really like it, and usually when I bring it, it sells out. Spice and dip mixes, again, was something I was making for family members, just like the pickles, and I just started selling those. And then apple syrup is actually made as a byproduct of me making the pie. It's made with everything that's left over from when I make a pie. So the core and the peel I actually use to make the syrup. So, it's just trying to figure out ways you can, things that you already good or things you already do, and just taking those to market if you're allowed to do that at your market. Every state has different laws as far as being a home-based vendor, which is what I am. So make sure you check into that before you just start doing these things. And some states allow a lot more than others. I'm limited in some things that I can do here in Indiana. So what's possible in the right market with the right producers and the willingness to sell and teach your customers at the same time. This was from May 2nd to December 30th, 3 to 4 days per week, depending on the season of the market. I did $12,117 in sales. And if you're really interested in urban farming, I really encourage you to try it. There's money to be made, and we need more good farmers, and we need more urban farmers. I think as time goes on, the larger and larger farmers are going to start dwindling because it's not sustainable. It's not a future that I think any of us really are looking forward to. There's so many recalls on vegetables and lettuce and stuff every year. Um, I really hope urban farming, and it has taken off over the years, it really has, but I really hope it keeps going, because I think we need more urban farmers. So, thanks for listening to the presentation here. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. If you are ever in South Bend, or if you are from South Bend, you can find me at booth number 143, which used to be next to DC Meats, but they are gone now, and there's 3 other booths next to me, but I'm still in the same booth. I own that booth, so I'm never leaving that booth. And if you have any questions or comments, anything, feel free to email me. It's at southbendhomestead@gmail.com. And again, thank you, and I will talk to you soon.